Welcome. This episode was made with NotebookLM. The intent here is simple, to serve as a refresher for those already familiar with Marine Corps doctrinal publication 1-1, strategy, and to provide a solid overview for those just beginning to study it. MCDP 1-1 is important because it explains how the Marine Corps thinks about the relationship between political objectives and military means, the balance of ends, ways, and means, and the role of adaptability in achieving strategic success. It reminds us that strategy is not just about battles, it's about linking every action from the smallest unit to the national level to a larger purpose. This doctrine matters because it helps Marines understand the big picture, how decisions at every level fit into the nation's overall objectives, and why clear strategic thought is essential for victory. Semper Fi and enjoy.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're digging into something foundational, a document many see as a real cornerstone. MCDP 1-1, strategy.
That's right.
Now when you hear strategy, maybe you picture a flowchart, steps A, B, C to get to a goal.
The mechanics.
Exactly. But what if it's, well, way more fundamental, more tangled up with conflict, with human interaction itself than just mechanics? What if it's this constant, deep challenge?
It really is, and it demands a different kind of thinking. There's this anonymous quote, but it's incredibly powerful right there in the intro to MCDP 1-1.
Which one is that?
The nation that draws too great a distinction between its scholars and its warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools.
Uh-oh. Yeah, that hits hard.
It's not just clever phrasing, is it? It's a real warning. It suggests that if you separate the thinking part from the doing part too much, well, you get this dangerous imbalance. Critical thought gets cut off from the realities on the ground, and action lacks foresight.
That really resonates. It points towards a more holistic view, doesn't it?
Right.
Like deep thinking isn't just for academics, and decisive action needs that thoughtful foundation.
Absolutely.
So for this deep dive, our mission isn't just, summarizing MCDP 1-1 again. This is really for those of you who know the basics, active duty folks, veterans, military scholars, and are ready to revisit it. Like really revisit it with fresh eyes, analytically, reflectively, almost like a PME seminar.
You're right.
We want to get into its philosophical core, the why behind it, and the really big questions it makes us ask about war and our place in it.
Exactly. And the foreword itself makes this clear. It says the goal is to give leaders a common grasp of strategy's fundamental nature and, crucially, to guide self-education for strategic thinking.
Self-education, that's key.
It is. And it explicitly says what it isn't. It does not attempt to provide a solution to current strategic problems, nor is it concerned with details of current American strategy.
So right away, that tells us we're talking timeless concepts, enduring principles, not tactics for today's fight.
It's about how to think strategically, not what specific strategy to use right now.
And that, I think, is exactly why this is so vital for every Marine. You might be thinking, hey, I'm not a strategist, I'm not in that billet.
Right. Why me?
But MCDP 1-1 basically argues, look, even if you're not crafting grand strategy, understanding this stuff is crucial because every single military action, however small it seems, can ripple upwards, can have strategic implications.
The link is often shorter than you think.
We're going to explore why that connection is so important, how a tactical move can have those big strategic effects. It's about being an educated player on the field.
Well put.
Okay, let's dive into part one then. The strategic environment unpacking the why of conflict. If we want to understand strategy, we first need to understand the ground it stands on, right? The conflict environment itself.
Absolutely. And you really have to start with war as a social and political phenomenon.
Clausewitz territory.
You got it. We ground it in Clausewitz's description of war, an instrument of policy, an expression of politics, plus, organized violence.
Okay, but here's something critical, and maybe often miss the distinction. MCDP 1-1 draws between policy and politics. They aren't the same thing.
Not at all, and it's a vital distinction for any strategist.
Let's unpack that. We use them interchangeably all the time in everyday talk. How does the doctrine separate them? What's the key difference?
So think of policy as the rational, conscious effort. It's a political body using its power to achieve a specific stated purpose. The reasoned aims, the goals a government lays out. Ideally, it's logical.
Okay, the intended goal.
Right. Politics, on the other hand, That's the messy, chaotic, interactive process. It's how power actually gets distributed and used in any group or society. And it's often not rational.
Driven by conflict, compromise, different interests.
Exactly. Outcomes in politics are often the result of all these competing forces, conflicting interests, personalities, chance, not some single clear intention. So when Clausewitz says war is an instrument of policy, he means it's a tool for achieving those rational aims.
Makes sense.
But when he says it's an expression of politics, he's acknowledging its inherent, well, irrationality sometimes, its dynamic nature, multiple wills crashing against each other, unexpected stuff happening out of that power struggle.
Ah, okay. So policy is the conscious aim, but it gets made through that messy political process, which explains why that old military complaint, keep politics out of the war, is just, well, wrong.
Fundamentally wrong, yeah. Strategists have to operate in both realms. You have to understand that intricate, often frustrating dance between the intended policy and the chaotic political reality it emerges from and operates within.
To ignore politics is to miss the whole picture of war and strategy.
Precisely. You have to recognize your goals are shaped by this political struggle, and your actions will have political consequences. Which leads us right into thinking about power itself. MCDP 1.1 goes pretty deep on this.
Power isn't just tanks and GDP, is it? We tend to think materially.
We do, but it's much more nuanced. Sure, power is material, economic resources, weapons industry, but often, maybe more often, it's psychological.
Like what?
Legal authority, intellectual prestige, maybe a leader's charisma, a nation's reputation for skill or resolve. The doctrine gives great examples. King Philip II of Spain, huge material power, colonies, silver.
Right.
But he was constrained by urban bankers in Europe who controlled his credit. They had a different kind of power. Or think about the Vietnam War era and the surprising influence of the anti-war movement back home. That was psychological and political power.
That's a really critical point. It means strategists have this tough job. Figure out where and in what form real power lies.
Yeah.
And then identify those rare points where military force can actually be effective against it.
Exactly. It's not always the obvious military target. Like you said, you can't just bomb a financial network, but maybe you can influence it other ways.
Right.
And this complex view of power pushes us to redefine war itself. It's not just nation-states duking it out.
Yeah. The text challenges that conventional idea.
It does. It highlights that nations and states aren't the same. Think Kurds a nation, no single state. Arabs a nation across many states. The old Soviet Union one state, many nations.
And a lot of conflict is internal, isn't it? Civil wars, insurgencies.
Absolutely. Or involves non-state actors in big ways. So the text gives us a really useful definition of war. It's organized violence.
Organized, keyword.
Keyword. Waged by two or more distinguishable groups, pursuing a political end, big enough in scale or impact to matter, and lasting long enough to actually affect political events.
That organized violence and political purpose part.
Yeah.
The doctrine uses that stark comparison between, what was it, Northern Ireland and Washington, D.C. murder rates.
Yeah, it's powerful. Over 25 years, D.C.'s murder rate was way higher, like 5 times higher. But Northern Ireland was clearly war. D.C. wasn't. Why?
Organization and political purpose.
Exactly. In Northern Ireland, it wasn't random crime. It was organized groups fighting for clear political goals. That's the crucial difference.
Context and intent change everything. Which brings us to section 1.2, right? The dynamic and unpredictable nature of war-making entities. We like things predictable, scientific, but MCDP 1.1 says, hold on.
Yeah, it cautions against that purely mechanical view, like treating countries or groups as if they're solid, predictable objects, like billiard balls, Hit one, predict exactly where it goes.
The unitary rational actor model.
Right. But real political entities aren't unitary. They're complex collections of actors, bureaucracies, factions, all intertwined. And they're not always rational. Their behavior comes from internal politics, history, culture, chance.
So if you rely only on that rational actor model,
you'll misunderstand motivations, ignore your own weaknesses, miss opportunities within the adversary. You'll just be constantly surprised.
So instead of mechanics, the text suggests thinking more like biology, ecology, a complex adaptive system that feels much closer to the reality of human conflict.
It's a critical shift in perspective. In these systems, everything adapts not just to the environment, but to each other. It's constant coevolution, competition, cooperation, change, all happening in ways that are fundamentally hard to predict precisely.
Like an ecosystem.
Exactly. Small changes might do nothing, or they might, as the text says, spark catastrophic change. You just can't know for sure beforehand because the system itself is always shifting, influencing its own future.
It's impossible to know in advance which slight perturbations will settle out unnoticed and which will spark catastrophic change.
That quote nails it for human politics, too. War isn't pure chaos, but it's inherently unpredictable in the specifics. So how does a strategist even cope?
It demands adaptability. You have to plan based on what seems probable now, but you must be ready for the unexpected setbacks, sudden chances. It's like a continuous ODO loop at the strategic level. Observe, reorient, decide, act, and then do it all again based on what happened. The plan isn't rigid. It's a hypothesis you're constantly testing.
Okay, but how do you find stability in all that turbulence? That brings us to 1.3, strategic constants and norms, right? Finding the anchors.
Precisely. Sir Julian Corbett's quote comes in handy. The vaguer the problem, the more resolute must we be in seeking points of departure. We need those firm standpoints. Like the climate versus weather analogy. You can predict January will be cold, even if you can't predict the exact temperature next Tuesday.
Perfect analogy. Climate is the constant, weather is the fluctuation. Strategic constants are those enduring forces that shape conflict over the long haul, giving us some predictability.
Let's look at the big ones, MCDP one-to-one highlights. First up, geography, the crushing impact. Seems obvious, but maybe we overlook its depth.
We often do. Geography, landforms, oceans, climate, resources, lines of communication, it's arguably the most fundamental constant. John M. Collins is quoted, "Misguided strategists who ignore the crushing impact of geography learn their lessons painfully."
Strong words.
Because geography influences everything. Maritime versus continental powers, strategic choke points like Hormuz or Panama, the advantage of mountains. It's not just a backdrop, it's an active player. Strategists have to analyze it at all levels.
Then there's national character. This sounds trickier. Deep-seated influences on how a people acts.
It's complex, yeah, but a crucial norm. It comes from location, language, culture, religion, history. It evolves slowly, like climate patterns. Think about the historical British reaction to aggression.
Right, the text mentions Pitt, Churchill, Thatcher versus Napoleon, the Kaiser, Hitler. A consistent pattern of defiance.
Exactly. Regardless of the specific leader or era, there's this pattern of resolute response when they see a villainous opponent bent on European domination. That's national character influencing predictable reactions.
And the Russian example, retreating deep, absorbing invaders, using the vast land, Charles XII, Napoleon, Hitler all faced that.
They did. And the text notes that the one power that did succeed against Russia in WWI, Imperial Germany, didn't just use military force. They used a political military strategy supporting internal revolution, understanding Russian vulnerabilities beyond just the battlefield. They grasped the interplay of the physical and the moral.
So understanding national character is way more than just counting divisions. It's like getting a psychological profile, but for a whole nation.
Right.
Though the text warns against ethnocentrism, right?
Absolutely vital warning. You can't project your own assumptions. Objectivity is key. Next constant. War and the state. Despite everything, the state is remarkably resilient in controlling organized violence.
War made the state, and the state made war.
Historically, yes. But the modern state generally keeps internal violence in check. If it fails, something else usually steps in. It underscores the enduring power of state structures, even with non-state actors around.
And the idea that even seemingly monolithic enemies have political fault lines.
A critical insight. No group is perfectly united. Finding those cracks, ethnic, religious, economic, state, offers ways to influence things beyond just fighting. Finally, the balance of power mechanism.
The invisible hand keeping anyone from getting too dominant.
Sort of, yeah. Alliances shift, states react to prevent one power from running the table. It's called the dominant myth and the fundamental law of interstate relations.
It can break down though, right? If someone makes a bid for dominance or a power vacuum opens up.
Definitely. The Gulf War is a great case study. The coalition formed partly because Iraq's invasion upset the regional balance. Afterwards, there was huge concern about leaving a vacuum if Saddam fell completely. Even within the coalition, different countries had slightly different views on what the right balance should look like. It's always operating.
Okay, so wrapping up part one, how does Clausewitz's remarkable trinity pull all this together? The passion, the chance, the reason.
It's a brilliant synthesis. The Trinity has three interacting elements. One, primordial violence, hatred, enmity, that's the raw emotion, mostly tied to the people. Two, the play of chance and probability fog, friction, uncertainty faced by the commander and the army. And three, it's subordination to policy, the rational calculation that's the government.
Emotion, chance, reason.
Always interacting, always shaping the war. Sometimes one dominates, sometimes another. The strategist has to grasp this dynamic interplay, understand which forces are strongest in this particular conflict to truly understand the nature of the war they're in.
That lays a really complex but necessary foundation, which leads us straight into part 2. Strategy defines the interrelation of ends and means. We understand the environment, now how do we act within it? That JFK quote really nails the challenge.
It does. Kennedy telling military pros they need to know tactics, logistics, but also economics, politics, diplomacy, history, and the limits of military power. It demands that holistic view.
A huge ask.
It is. Strategy, at its heart, is about linking ends and means. In conflict, it's how you use specific means to get specific ends. And those ends, even if they look social or economic, are ultimately political in this framework. They're about power.
And military strategy is always just one part, subordinate to the bigger national strategy, the one that integrates all the tools, DMI, right?
Yeah.
Diplomatic, economic, military, informational.
Exactly. National strategy is the grand design. It starts broad, national interests, survival, security, well-being, stability. Then it gets specific. Vital interests, the non-negotiables you'll fight for.
Things you absolutely won't compromise on.
Right. These lead to concrete objectives, the actual goals you need to achieve. And policies and commitments dictate how you pursue those objectives day to day, which might eventually lead to conflict. The key is keeping that chain linked. National strategy, military strategy, supporting strategies, they all have to align with the political purpose. A disconnect is disastrous.
Making sure the military actions serve the political goals. Okay, what about the most fundamental goals? Survival and victory. Seems simple, but the text says they're actually really complex to define.
They really are. What does survival even mean? Continued existence, a way of life, population well-being, or maybe just ensuring a heroic legacy, even in defeat. If a group believes survival lies in martyrdom or the afterlife, threatening annihilation might not work.
That's a sobering thought.
And victory usually means achieving your political aims, sure, but it also has to mean ending the war, reestablishing some kind of peace. The problem is cost-benefit analysis in war is incredibly subjective. Victories is loaded with emotion. How do you objectively measure the value of the goal against the cost in lives and treasure?
Almost impossible.
So the strategist must try to understand what survival and victory mean in this specific situation, not just for their side, but for every participant in the fight.
Understanding the adversary's definition is just as crucial as your own, which leads to another core distinction. Political objectives. Limited versus unlimited. This feels absolutely central.
It is foundational. Get this wrong, and your whole strategy can collapse. An unlimited political objective aims to eliminate the opponent as a political entity. Remove their leadership, take their assets, change the whole regime, maybe even, historically, extermination. The text mentions Serbia trying to reabsorb parts of Yugoslavia, or the U.S. and Panama in '89 removing Noriega, changing the power structure. The goal is to fundamentally remove or reshape the adversary's political existence.
Okay, so a limited political objective leaves the adversary basically intact, but changes their behavior or reduces their power.
Precisely. Their leadership survives, but you force a policy change, reduce their military capacity, take some territory, intimidate them. Revolutionaries, conquerors often seek unlimited ends. States looking for a better power balance or reformers usually pursue limited ones. Knowing the difference is critical for deciding how much effort, risk, and sacrifice is appropriate.
Makes sense. Now let's revisit the instruments of national power, DMI. We keep saying military is just one tool.
And it's worth hammering home. Diplomatic tools, talks, treaties, relationships, economic tools, trade, aid, sanctions, military force or the threat of it, informational, ideas, propaganda, shaping perceptions.
Used to be called psychological ops.
Right, and these aren't separate silos. They overlap, they depend on each other. Diplomacy needs military and economic muscle behind it sometimes. Military power needs economic support and diplomatic legitimacy.
Which brings us back to the military professional's responsibility. The text says they focus on military means, naturally, but must be conscious of the others, how to use them, how to defend against them, and that critical insight.
Say it again, it's crucial.
Military force is an inappropriate tool for the solution of most political difficulties. Force is, at best, a necessary means for clearing obstacles to more peaceful solutions. Understanding limits is part of professionalism.
It's paramount. ethically and effectively. Military leaders must help political leaders understand what military force can do, but also what it cannot do. The text suggests asking 3 key questions.
Okay, what are they?
1, how can our military capabilities help the other instruments, like using military logistics for humanitarian aid that boosts diplomacy? 2, how can the other instruments help our military efforts, like diplomatic deals for basing rights or economic aid winning local support?
And the third one feels really important.
It is. 3, how might our use of force impede or imperil political goals? A tactical win could cause a huge political backlash, right? Undermine the whole strategic game. These questions force that balanced, holistic view.
Always weighing the second and third order effects. Now, strategy isn't static, adapting ends to means and vice versa. It's fluid.
Totally fluid. Successes, failures, new players jumping in, resources changing. You have to constantly reevaluate. Maybe the enemy's weaker than you thought. You might expand your goals. Maybe your resistance is tougher. Or you lose resources. You might have to scale back ambitions. The Cold War is the perfect example over decades.
Right, the evolution of U.S. containment strategy.
Yeah,
Same basic end, contain the Soviets, but pursued with very different means over time.
exactly. Start with Eisenhower's massive retaliation. The U.S. had nuclear superiority. The threat was any major Soviet move, even conventional, could mean nuclear war. It was more bang for the buck. Leveraging one big asymmetrical advantage means primarily nuclear and containment.
But that changed with Kennedy's flexible response. Why the shift?
Well, the Soviets caught up nukes-wise, so massive retaliation wasn't as credible. Plus, you had all these wars of national liberation popping up. Flexible response meant building up conventional forces, counterinsurgency capabilities, being able to respond at any level, not just nuclear holocaust or nothing. More symmetrical, different means, same end.
And then Nixon's détente shifted things again.
Another adaptation. Détente mixed pressure with incentives. Arms control talks, opening to China to pressure the Soviets, the Nixon doctrine saying allies need to do more for their own defense, less reliance on U.S. ground troops. Same goal, containment, but again, a dramatically different mix of diplomatic, economic, and military means adapted to the reality of that time. That fluidity is essential.
Constant reevaluation.
Yeah.
Okay, last big concept in this section. Military strategy, annihilation versus erosion, the 2 basic ways to use military force.
Fundamentally, yes, annihilation is an unlimited military objective. The goal, eliminate the enemy's ability to resist, make them militarily helpless. Doesn't always mean killing everyone, could be shattering their command structure, logistics, morale, so they just can't fight effectively anymore. Works best if you have overwhelming superiority.
And erosion sounds more like wearing them down.
Exactly. It's a limited military objective. The goal, convince the enemy that stopping the fight on your terms is better than continuing. You wear down their will to fight, rather than destroying their physical ability. You use this when you can't, or choose not to, go for total destruction, maybe because your own political goals are limited.
Now, here's the tricky part, the one that trips people up. A limited political goal doesn't automatically mean a limited military strategy. The Gulf War example is gold here.
It's absolutely critical to grasp this. 1991 Gulf War. The coalition had a limited political objective: kick Iraq out of Kuwait, restore Kuwait's sovereignty. They did not aim to overthrow Saddam or occupy Iraq.
Right, limited political aim.
But they used an unlimited military strategy to achieve it: an annihilation of Iraqi forces in the Kuwait theater, overwhelming air and ground power to smash the Iraqi army's ability to resist in that specific area.
Yeah.
So decisive annihilative force can absolutely be used to achieve a constrained political end.
That distinction is huge. Annihilation strategies seem simpler, maybe. Focus on the enemy military, winning, they're broken. Erosion seems more complex.
It often is. Erosion involves more variables. Your main effort might shift between diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, military harassment, information campaigns. Targets could be enemy forces, but also their economy, their public support, their political stability. Victory is often less dramatic, maybe a slow crumbling of will, like the long-term containment of the Soviets. Not one big battle, but steady pressure.
Can these strategies get blurry in the real world? Overlap.
Oh, definitely. The threat of annihilation might be enough to erode will. An erosion strategy that fails might force you to escalate towards annihilation if the goal is vital enough. The key thing, MCDP 1.1 says, is the strategist must be able to tell which strategy is being pursued or which should be pursued. Clarity is vital. If your strategy isn't achieving either erosion or annihilation, it's failing.
That's clarity of purpose. Okay, that sets us up for part 3, crafting strategy, the art of decision-making. We've got the environment, the ends, the means. How do we actually make strategy? That John Train quote about the spider's web, everything connected, highlights the complexity.
It really does. Strategy making is rarely that neat, rational, top-down process we imagine. It's usually distributed. Bits and pieces take shape in different places, different times, driven by different people with different perspectives and incomplete information. It's less like building an engine, more like tending a garden. You're constantly adjusting,
A
reacting.
messy, adaptive process.
Yeah.
But it still has to answer fundamental questions,
Yeah.
right? Especially about who does what, civilian versus military roles.
Absolutely. Key question strategy must answer. First, what are the political objectives? That's primarily civilian leadership defining the state's interests, though the military advises on feasibility.
Okay.
Second, what military objectives achieve those political ones? That's a dialogue, political leaders translating aims, military offering options. Third, how do we achieve the military objectives? Here, military leadership takes the lead in planning campaigns, but still needs civilian oversight on potential negative consequences, politically or ethically.
And fourth,
How do we allocate effort? Across different theaters, different campaigns, that's often shared, but political leadership usually sets the broad priorities. The military's job throughout is to give honest advice on what's possible and what the risks are.
a constant dialogue, not just orders flowing down, which leads to the strategic assessment, observation, and orientation. Basically the OD loop at the strategic level.
You can think of it that way, yeah. It's that continuous process. You start by analyzing the big picture stuff from Chapter 1, geography, national character, states, balance of power. Then you zoom in on the specifics of this conflict, its roots, its dynamics. And it's not a one-shot deal. You're constantly reassessing.
And a huge, maybe agonizing part is that value versus cost calculation for everyone involved, not just dollars, but will, sacrifice.
Yeah, this is deep. You have to ask, how much does each side value their political goals? What are they truly willing to sacrifice? Money, material, lives. How much pain can their society endure, and for how long? Think about the Vietnamese enduring decades of war, or the Soviets in WWII. Getting that assessment wrong, underestimating an adversary's will to suffer, is a classic path to strategic failure.
All that assessment feeds into identifying the center of gravity and critical vulnerability, right? MCDP 1.1 calls these indispensable concepts your strategic compass.
Exactly. They're the framework for turning your assessment into focused action. The center of gravity, the cog, that's a key source of the enemy's strength, the physical or moral, that lets them resist. It's the hub of all power and movement. Finding it focuses your effort on what truly matters.
Could be their army, their capital city, public support, maybe a key leader for a non-state group.
All possibilities. And then the critical vulnerability, the CV, this isn't just any weakness, it's a potential weakness that if you hit it, significantly undermines that cog. And crucially, it has to be something you have the means to attack effectively.
So find their core strength, then find a weakness linked to it that you can actually exploit.
That's the essence. The examples in the text are great. WWII allies. German army is the cog, CVs. Their petroleum supply, ball-bearing production, transportation network. Attack those, and the army grinds to a halt.
Instead of just fighting tank on tank everywhere.
Right. Or Scott's Anaconda Plan in the Civil War. Confederacy's cog. Ability to sustain a long defensive war. CVs. Weak industry, few ports, poor transport, dependence on foreign stuff. So blockade the ports, seize the Mississippi, capture rail hubs, gradually strangle their ability and will to fight. COG and CV give you that essential focus.
Once you have that focus, you develop the strategic concept, the blueprint, the bridge from assessment to action.
It's the unifying idea. The strategic concept lays out the main military objectives, links them to the other DMI tools, sets priorities, allocates resources, dictates where you'll concentrate effort. It's the high-level guidance for campaign planning. Think WWII again. The defeat Germany first decision was a core part of the Allied strategic concept. It set the priorities between Europe and the Pacific, guided the sequence of campaigns. It was the overarching theory of victory.
The big idea of how you intend to win. Now, shifting gears slightly, just war theory. This brings in the moral dimension. Western societies especially seem to demand not just winning, but winning rightly.
It's deeply ingrained. We need to feel we're in the right. Just war theory gives us that ethical framework, 2 parts. Jus ad bellum, the rightness of going to war, and jus in bello, rightness in the conduct of war.
And jus ad bellum has those traditional criteria, right? Like 7 of them.
Yeah, the main ones are just cause, like self-defense, right authority, declared by a legit government, right intention, aiming for peace, not just revenge or gain, Proportionality of ends, the good must outweigh the harm of war itself. Last resort, tried peaceful options. Reasonable hope of success, don't fight pointless wars. And the aim of peace, ultimately seeking a just peace. These aren't just philosophical points. They shape international law and public opinion.
And jus in bello means even if the cause is just, how you fight matters. You can't just do anything. Proportionality and discrimination are key.
Exactly. Bombing that power plant might seem tactically smart, but if it causes massive civilian suffering or environmental disaster, it could violate jus in bello and destroy your moral standing, potentially undermining your whole strategy. The strategist has to make the case for both the justice of the cause and the justice of the conduct. Fail that, and the text says the strategy is likely fatally flawed. You lose support.
A crucial balancing act. Okay, let's finish with strategy-making pitfalls. Given how complex this all is, it's easy to fall into traps.
Very easy. The pressure is immense. The stakes are high. One big trap is seeking strategic panaceas. The magic bullet, the universal solution. Mahan's naval theories, Schlieffen's plan, Cold War deterrence. Brilliant in their context, maybe, but dangerous when applied rigidly everywhere without thought. They become blinders.
Another one, emphasizing process over product,
Yeah.
getting lost in the bureaucracy.
Yeah, bureaucracies love checklists and standard procedures. It feels orderly. But if you rely too much on the process of strategy making, you might think that guarantees a good strategy. It doesn't. You can end up with predictable, stale strategies by default that an enemy can easily figure out. You stop thinking critically about the actual problem.
What about the fait accompli, the quick surgical strike that's supposed to solve everything?
Oh, leaders love these. Promises a fast, clean win. Like Israel hitting Osirak, maybe some EOs, the huge pitfall. It often becomes just the opening gambit in what turns out to be a long-term conflict. Think Argentina grabbing the Falklands. They thought it would be quick and done, big miscalculation of political will, tactical success, strategic failure.
And that recurring, dangerous error, mischaracterizing limited and unlimited wars. We keep coming back to this.
Because it's so fundamental. You can and should classify the objectives of the players as limited or unlimited, but you cannot label the war itself as simply limited or unlimited. Vietnam is the classic example. North Vietnam had unlimited goals: survival, unity, using annihilation against the South, erosion against the U.S. The U.S. had limited political goals, mainly using erosion against the North. You can't just call that whole complex limited.
And confusing scale with objectives is also a mistake, right? Small wars aren't always limited.
Exactly. Panama 89 was small scale, but unlimited objectives, regime change, leader removal. The danger of mislabeling wars is you end up with the wrong strategy, often holding back when you need to be decisive or committing too little when the stakes are actually unlimited for the adversary. You have to understand the real nature of the fight.
Finally, the twin dangers at the extremes: paralysis and recklessness.
The two cliffs you can fall off. Paralysis by analysis, getting so overwhelmed by complexity you can't act. Just as bad as recklessness, making hasty, stupid decisions without enough thought. Strategy always involves uncertainty. You rarely have all the info.
So the strategist has to find that middle ground.
That's the art. Balance opportunity against risk, and to balance both against uncertainty. It takes discipline, study, thinking through consequences, but also the courage to act decisively, tempered with perspective.
Wow, that's quite a tightrope walk.
It's the essence of strategic leadership, lifelong learning.
What a deep dive. We've gone from philosophy to the nuts and bolts of decision-making. And as we wrap up, the relevance of MCDP 1.1 today for every Marine just seems undeniable.
Absolutely. Sun Tzu said it thousands of years ago. War is a matter of vital importance. It is mandatory that it be thoroughly studied. And Mahan warned, if the strategy be wrong, the skill of the general fail of their effect. These ideas are timeless. Intellectual rigor isn't optional. It's essential.
Especially now, right? This post-Cold War world, messy, chaotic, persistent conflict, especially in the littorals, new domains like cyber. The Marine Corps, as that expeditionary force in readiness, is right in the thick of it.
And while the Corps doesn't usually set national strategy, it's deeply involved in executing it. That means you can't just follow orders blindly. You need to understand the intent, the objectives, the overall concept. That's what allows Marines to adapt, to seize opportunities, to avoid screwing things up strategically. That understanding comes from this kind of thinking.
So it empowers everyone, right down the line. The document says, few Marines will grasp the larger strategic picture. Nonetheless, a fundamental understanding will help Marines appreciate the importance of their role. It helps you understand why the ROE are what they are, why guidance changes, and how your small tactical action can have big strategic ripples.
That short distance between tactical action and its strategic impact. And for staff and commanders, this knowledge lets them participate intelligently in the strategy-making process, giving good advice on capabilities and limitations. There's no shortcut to this wisdom. It's not about information dominance. It's about the judgment, experience, and education of our Marines, developing thinkers.
Which circles back to the core message. These concepts need serious and ongoing contemplation. It's not a checklist. It's a framework for thinking, for internalizing, for constantly getting better at understanding this complex environment. That continuous effort is fighting smart. And the ultimate goal, MCDP 1-to-1 states, equip every Marine with the thinking ability to win. A powerful call to keep learning.
Couldn't agree more.
So to leave you, our listeners, with something to chew on after all this, consider these questions for yourself.
First, thinking about that messy interplay of politics and policy, where's the biggest challenge today for military leaders trying to keep their actions aligned with political goals, especially when things are so ambiguous and volatile?
Second, look back at an operation or even a training exercise you were part of. If you had explicitly identified the COG and CV for both sides beforehand, how might that have changed your approach, your understanding of the real objectives, or how you used your resources?
And finally, MCDP 1.1 says military force is often the wrong tool. In your experience, what are the temptations, subtle or obvious, for military leaders to lean too heavily on military solutions? And how can they proactively ensure they're advising political leaders on a truly balanced approach using all the DMI instruments?
Some deep questions to reflect on. We really hope this exploration of MCDP 1-to-1 strategy offered some fresh insights and encourages your own continued strategic thinking. Until next time on The Deep Dive, keep thinking, keep learning.
And keep diving deep.